We are hoping this can be a relatively short hearing because we're all going to go home and watch the election results, regardless of what stripe we belong to. So, welcome. My name is Dawn Philibert. This is the South Burlington Development Review Board for Tuesday, November 5th. And I'm the chair of the board. I'd like to introduce the other board members. Charlie Johnston, Quinn Mann, Frank Hochman, Jody Lesko, John Muscatelli, and Mark Baer. How's that? I got them all. And staff Marla Keene and Marty Gillis. So thank you all for being here. There's a couple of ways to participate in this hearing. One is to attend, as you have the three of you have here. And if you are attending here, please sign up on the sign up sheet in the back of the room. And you can also participate virtually online and by phone. If you're attending virtually, please, in the comment section, put your contact information to register that you are a participant. And similarly, if you are calling in, please send your contact information to Marla at mkeene@southburlingtonvt.gov. That way we'll have a record of your participation. Okay, let's start with emergency evacuations. There are doors in the back of the room on the left and the right. If we need to evacuate, go out those doors and either turn right or left and you'll be outside of the building. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items? Nope. Hearing none. Let's see, any announcements and reminders? I don't think we need to go through that. Are there any comments and questions from the public that are not related to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. We will move on to the first agenda item. Item number 5, continued master plan application MP 2403 of WGM Associates to subdivide an existing approximately 10.0 acre lot development with 3 homes and an existing non-conforming commercial or private parking facility into 10 single-family home lots ranging from 0.26 acres to 2.05 acres. One single-family home lot with an existing non-conforming commercial or private parking facility on 1.52 acres, and one 1.0 acre civic space lot at 850 Heinsberg Road. Who is here for the applicant, please?
Keith Wright
Hi, Keith.
and my wife Nicole.
Hi, Nicole. Welcome back.
Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates.
Hi, Dave. Thanks. So as you are all pretty familiar with this process, and what we will do, there are 2 staff reports that apply to you tonight, and that's our full agenda. And we will start with the first one. And as you know, we go through the report and we focus on the items that the staff have put in red. And because you had a chance to look at these, very often some of the issues you've resolved or already addressed. So let me just get my mine up in front of me. 3. Okay. Okay. I think I've already read them. Pardon?
Swearman.
We will.
Oh.
I will. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. I'm sure I would have done that. I'm going to swear you in. Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. And Nicole, are you testifying? Oh, okay.
I can, but if you want me to.
Well, if you do, I'll have to swear you in. So, okay, good. So do you have any comments to make before we launch into reviewing the comments?
No.
I think there are only 2 for this first one. Okay. Number one, staff recommends the board require the applicant to update the plat and revise the right-of-way to be more regularly and consistently shaped prior to closing the master plan.
So we revised sheet MP2 to reflect the fact that we want to have all of the future utilities and sidewalk located within the public right of way or within the right of way. And with that, we updated sheet MP2 to reflect that and to smooth the edges as far as the right of way. So that was the effort in regards to that. The plat itself is one that we would like to reserve as part of the second item on tonight's agenda, which is the subdivision plan, as far as continuing to update that to reflect the conditions of approval.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
I asked DPW, because this comment came from DPW, I asked DPW to review can you go to the second page? To review the proposed plat. It looks like it's 64 feet on the east-west segment and 44 feet on the north-south segment.
Correct.
Okay. They thought that was strange, but ultimately fine. Because it's sort of different between the two, but ultimately fine. There were some questions about it's wider on the east-west because it includes stormwater. And then why wasn't that necessary on the north-south? Felt like something they could talk to you about at the final plat stage of review and didn't need answers to that right now.
I'm sorry, I lost that last sentence.
That the questions were about why was the stormwater included in the width in the east-west segment and not in the north-south segment? But DPW didn't feel like they had to know the answer to that right
Oh,
now. It was just a
okay.
question they wanted to know the answer to at the final plat stage.
Now I can hear you. Sorry, my
Okay.
fault.
Good. All right. Let's move on to number two. The applicant must offer the road as public. Well, you've already read this, so I'm not going to read it. It's quite kind of a long comment. What are your thoughts about this question or comment? The irrevocable offer for phase one.
That's fine.
I'm sorry.
I said, that's fine. I was really hoping that you'd read it all for us, so that
Do you want me to
tee
read it?
it up. Sure.
Okay, go ahead. The applicant must offer the road as public infrastructure. Otherwise, it would not be permitted to be more than 200 feet long. No discussion of when the road must be offered has yet occurred. Staff recommends the board require an irrevocable offer of dedication and deed for the roadway to be provided as part of the phase two subdivision application. Staff considers provision of an irrevocable offer for phase one may result in future property owners requesting city council take over a roadway that does not meet city standards. In addition, the totality of the road will not be subdivided until phase two.
That's acceptable to the applicant.
Okay, you made me do all that just to say it's acceptable? Really?
I thought I had answered, but I guess I didn't do a good enough job.
Home early.
Yeah. My fault.
So I have a question. Okay, you go first, Frank.
How much of the road will be completed as part of phase one?
Can you make sure your microphone is on?
How much of the road will be completed in length as part of phase one?
You want to pull up that plan again?
I think that's a question for the applicant to answer.
Probably the others. Oh, sure. Yeah.
So it's
That one's
down
right.
on that plan.
Let's try the next sheet, MP2, if we can. There we go. So the existing roadway infrastructure on the far left side or west side of this particular plan is essentially in place. And that the remaining work is that east-west leg of the roadway, in which it will service only those three homes and one ADU on the north side, plus the existing home. All the other homes on the other side would be part of a future phase of the project. So to answer your question, it's approximately half of the roadway.
How many feet?
I don't
Seems-
remember that off the top of my head, Frank, but we
Isn't
can give you
that,
an answer.
isn't that pertinent, Marla?
I'm sorry.
Property is 660 long.
The
Civic
it's
space.
pertinent
only 70.
in the sense of the overall approval, but not relevant to this staff comment about the timing of the offer.
Well, if phase two never gets built and it's more than 200 feet, then it'll be a problem, right?
That was going to be my question. What happens? What does the city do?
Am I looking at the linear feet on the left-hand side there? If we scroll to the left on that same page, looks like there was a key. But maybe I'm not looking at it.
Oh, yeah, that big table on the left.
I got that.
To answer your question, I think that if they never built phase two, it is somewhat awkward. But the purpose of the master plan is to allow them to get a phased approval. And other projects have gotten similar phased approvals where they don't build to the property line in the first phase. But yes, it is somewhat awkward.
Okay. Does that satisfy your interest, Frank?
No,
Your question? Okay,
You've rightly identified that it's awkward.
right. So we're agreed on that. And so then what? Then it needs to be built, then it needs to be finished. Right?
And
So
who's
the
responsible?
the board's conversations prior to this moment have been that they would accept a master plan for a road that will meet city standards and allow it to not meet city standards until the full master plan is constructed.
Seems wrong.
But that doesn't change, that doesn't solve the problem is what if only phase one is completed, right?
Well, that question could have been raised, at our very first sketch plan conversation. We've been operating under the assumption that the board was kind of okay with this phased approach. I don't disagree that it's, as I said, an awkward situation, but I don't really have a suggestion for you. If I had one, I would have made it much earlier in this process.
So
The only reason not to require a proper build out of the road is for the sake of the city, right?
Sorry,
What,
can you
you
rephrase
had a
that?
rationale for allowing the circumstance.
I believe there's a legal turnaround at the end of phase one, right? There's gonna be like a hammer turnaround that
Correct.
fire trucks and everyone can still access and get turned around on the road. And then if they go to phase two, it's an extension of that hammer turnaround.
So I think you stole my thunder. What I was really trying to bring to Frank's attention, the fact that the roadway is designed to comply with the city standards in regards to width as well as the vertical profile and the turnaround at the end. So the intent of at least those particular horizontal features and vertical features are do meet the current design requirements. So that is ultimately the foundation for the future roadway and the future going forward. Things that are not compliant with this particular phase is dealing with the water main, where the applicant, in order to basically satisfy the future phases, would be required to put in an 8-inch water main as opposed to the smaller diameter service that's proposed right now. And it would also have to require a sidewalk. So our goal or our requirements was to make sure that whatever we put on a piece of paper today could support those particular improvements in the future without having to do major redesign work. So the intent of compliance is always there. It is there as part of the application. And the important thing is to be able to add to it in the future to be able to make it fully compliant as phase two goes forward. So the
Well,
intent
get
was
that,
always
and it
to,
works if phase two gets built, but nothing requires phase two to be built.
so the phase one has specific requests of the board as far as waivers based on the small number of units that are being served as far as meeting 100% compliance with the roadways. So those were all alternative demonstrations in with regard to meeting this the land development regulations. And all of those things were reviewed with Public Works.
Mhm.
And at this point in time, we haven't gotten any pushback in regard, other than what's indicated in their particular notes that the applicant is quite comfortable meeting. So we came from a position of understanding. We've basically put into place those particular requirements. And at this point in time, are looking for essentially, the approval consistent with the approaches that have always been discussed.
Is there a condition we can place that would require if phase 2 isn't built out by some timeline that would bring this into full compliance if needed? Is that an option?
No, what, the fail-safe is that the road would never become public.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. wait.
Don't I have a question?
Can you, hold on just a sec. Can you live with that, Frank?
I don't have any further comment.
Okay. All right. Yes, Mark.
I mean, I can live with that because basically at this point you're servicing four houses.
Correct.
With a road that's built to, predominantly city standards, if we trigger phase 2, you're going to be adding sidewalk, hydrants, main, things like that. And the current road has a hammerhead turnaround, but what happens at the end of the road at phase 2, where you kind of just dead end at the property line? Is the driveway for that last house designed by DPW standards for a fire truck turnaround?
Well, I think one of the obligations or the expectations was that we'd make that final connection all the way through.
Right, but connects it through, but to where?
To the private roadway that currently services both Dynapower and Lane Prep.
Oh, so you would tie into there?
Correct.
Okay.
One of
But
the
we can't-
DPW comments was that, there'd have to be a turnaround if it only got, at the end of phase 2, if it only got built to phase 2. Which, that's on page, sort of the middle of page 3 of the staff report. The DPW comment was, the project proposes to eliminate the hammerhead turnaround constructed as part of phase 1 when the road is extended. Phase 2 must include a turnaround at its end. Staff suggestion was that the board have a condition to require a hammerhead turnaround at the end of phase 2 if it does not connect to the road on the adjacent lot.
I would agree with that, because we can't mandate Dynapower provide that connection.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
But we have had discussions in regards to certain benefits that would accrue to those people who do own that private road relative to water distribution and redundancies and looping and things of that nature. So there are some carrots at the end of the road, so to speak, as far as ultimately achieving what would be the ideal full completion of the roadway.
Which you're comfortable with, if the connection to Dynapower is not made, you'd provide the approved firehead or hammerhead
Yeah.
turnaround? Okay,
That is correct.
then I'm comfortable with what we see here.
Any other questions? Okay, now, one of the recommendations by staff, and I know we're gonna have public comment, was that we not close this until we close the master plan. But what we will do is vote to conclude this review, is that correct?
Sure. And then you can close them both together at the end of the night if they're both ready.
All right, so let's
I
see. if-
got one more comment.
Sure.
Just real quick. And I don't know if this is gonna be addressed in site plan, not for master plan, but
Sure.
it's the question of what is that? What's it called? Maxine's Way, the road? Maxine's Way doesn't technically start till you get through the farmyard, correct?
I think it starts at Heinsberg Road.
It starts at Heinsberg
It
Road, but
does.
you're driving through a working farmyard. What type of delineation is gonna be done to keep, the farm trucks and active work being on there from going into the road right away?
It would just be like a street, I guess. I
Right,
mean,
but I understand it's gonna be like a street, but
Right.
what's gonna prevent someone from coming in for a drop off or something like that and stopping where they're blocking half of the road?
Oh,
That's what I mean, because if you look at the aerial,
right,
you can see right now it's just a big open.
Basically, I don't have any, the only thing that comes and drops anything off is UPS or FedEx. My trucks are just parked there.
Okay.
I haul aviation fuel to the airport.
Mm.
So they usually run couple drivers run during the day, a couple drivers run at night, and they just park their trucks there.
Okay.
So basically they come into work, park their pickup, hop in the truck and go get their load, bring it to the airport, then come back home.
Okay. I think we just need to have some condition that just says the street right of way is
Right,
kept clear in some fashion, whether it's
Absolutely,
stripe
yeah.
or something.
absolutely.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see if there's any public comment. Are there any members of the public? There are none here, but online or on the phone who would like to comment? No, okay. Then, let's take a vote to conclude this hearing. Do I hear I'd entertain a motion to do so?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of concluding this review, which is MP 2403, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it is carried. Okay, moving on. Nope, that's not it. Bear with me, please. It's the other one. Okay, thank you for your patience. Okay. This is preliminary plat application SD 2408 of WGM Associates for Phase 1 of a concurrent master plan for a development consisting of 11 single-family homes and an existing non-conforming commercial or private parking facility. The phase consists of the creation of 7 lots, 3 containing existing single-family homes, 2 to contain new homes, 1 to contain an existing non-conforming commercial or private parking facility and a new home, and 1 civic space lot at 850 Heinsberg Road. Do I need to swear them in again, since this is a separate application? Probably.
Let's say yes.
Pardon?
Yes.
Let's say yes.
Okay, let's swear. Let's raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Okay, let's work our way through the staff. Do you have any comments before we dive into the staff comments?
No.
Okay. Number 1, comment number 1. Staff recommends the board consider the impacts of the applicant's request for deferring improvements in totality and determine whether to permit it. What are your comments about that? And I have a question, but let's hear your comments first.
So in this particular case, there are a number of alternative compliance requests before the board. Again, reviewed with Public Works in regards to their,
Could you pull the microphone in a little bit closer?
I'm sorry.
Yes,
that
much
better?
better, much
Okay.
better.
So this particular section of the staff report deals with a number of alternative compliance approaches and requests before the board. And it also, in regards to those particular either, well, I'll call them alternate means of compliance, that it also means that you're not going to get 100% bulletproof municipal road on day one. And this is ultimately the same discussion we just had with the master plan is that acceptable to the board in regards to moving forward? We've heard Frank, and ultimately the master plan is the framework for how each phase is managed. So that is essentially a segue from our previous discussions into this particular item in regards to, as staff indicates, the totality of all of those particular requests before the board and whether or not they make sense in regards to the fact that the next phase will be required to put all of those improvements in place in order to enable the additional units to be constructed.
So the staff report talks about the burden on the cost of developing future phases. Isn't all of this actually at the applicant's risk?
So it is and it's not, right? At this time, the applicant is the owner of all of this land.
Right.
Once this master plan expires in between 6 and 10 years.
Yes.
City Council last night passed the draft LDRs and this land will be zoned industrial, industrial open space, industrial commercial, one of those industrial zoning districts, residential will no longer be allowed. So once this master plan expires, if there are remaining lands to be developed, the development potential will be for a more commercial type of development, and there would be sort of residential component and a commercial component. It's fine. We do this all the time. So potentially in a longer term view, the cost of improving this roadway could fall on either residential or commercial tenants of the undeveloped space,
I see.
which may or may not be the applicant and their
Okay.
extended family.
Okay. So the city doesn't have any authority to force these improvements later if the applicant doesn't build future phases?
If there is no construction of the future phases, there's no nexus for requiring any
Okay.
improvements. It does get somewhat difficult to tell someone, say, many years in the future, the other lots are owned by other individuals and there's a condition of an old approval that says you have to upgrade this roadway. And they say, we had nothing to do with that original approval. Why do we have to upgrade the
Right.
roadway?
And
So
they can
it gets difficult.
Yeah.
But we just wanted you to go into this with eyes wide open.
Right.
It gives me a lot of anxiety because there are a few situations like this throughout the city.
Mhm.
But this is what the applicant's been asking for. They've been very consistent in their message. Just want to make sure everybody's
Okay.
fully understanding what they're deciding on.
Frank, you look at somebody,
It's the same issue. I mean, basically, it's not alternative compliance, it's a license for potential non-compliance.
Yeah.
I mean, we're playing with words here. You're allowing them to build something that they couldn't build as a freestanding thing without complying with what it would require,
Mhm.
period. And, I don't know how that can be okay with everybody.
Other board members?
Well, trying to understand, because and maybe I missed a meeting in between, but I think I remember the first time you guys came before the board, you basically said that you're looking to subdivide the land that you and your two sisters own.
Yes.
So that you could take some value out of it and they could maintain their ownership and keep it, as 3 simple lots,
Yes,
because they weren't planning on doing anything at this time.
correct.
At this point, you would do the development for these 4 lots, gravel road, with a plan that could be triggered at a later date by your two sisters
Yes.
to do the other 6 homes, whatever, 5 homes. So that's additional homes that are being proposed. But how has that financially been resolved that,
Well,
if the additional planning is triggered, that the
I
road
think-
has to be updated?
I think if they came to that and wanted to do that, they would have to do the same as I have done. Through this whole thing with Dave, we have divided everything up. Anything that's to do with the subdivision of my part, I'm financially responsible for. I'm paying for the road. I'm doing all that because it's for those houses.
Well, you're paying for the gravel road.
Yes.
And the 1-inch main and no sidewalks.
Yep.
But if phase 2 is triggered,
They
and you have to
choose to
pave it, put the
develop,
8-inch main, they're
then
responsible for that.
They're gonna have to do like I did, come before the board and you will give them whatever you want them to do. And it's like, we did put in the, sewer line for the city sewer.
Mhm.
That's all been put in.
Right.
So we split that up 3 ways
Okay.
and we have a total of what it cost.
Mhm.
And anytime a house hooks onto it, they have to buy in their share.
But if the minute the first house of phase two is triggered, the road has to be brought up to city standards and the road has to be connected to the property.
Then everybody would have to more or less do their part.
So that there's an agreement in place for a third of the expenses. of
We
all
don't
that.
have one yet, but I mean, we could put one in place.
I guess
mean-
what you hear from us as the board is the
Right.
hesitancy.
I mean, I guess at that point, I mean, I'd be putting in basically half of the road myself, except for the paving and the
Right.
sidewalk. You know, it might be only fair that they pay for the other half.
Yeah.
Um,
And then I guess.
I'm all for being fair.
Yep, I understand that. And it's family, you know,
Yes.
no one wants to get in the middle of family, but we have to plan for that. Marla, and Marty, would this, if they didn't have phase two proposed, would phase one be allowed with the gravel road and the four houses off of it with the hammerhead turnaround?
I think it's tricky. They tried to propose just phase one
I
and
know.
you said no. So it's a bit of a catch-22.
Right.
You know,
It's the no that is, and the people are dancing around. You can't have this as a freestanding the development without the prospect of the later phases, which are uncertain. And I just can't get past it. It's a, you know, I realize it's a hardship for the applicant.
Yeah, are we supposed to be reviewing applications thinking the next phases are not gonna happen, or that the applicant has proposed future phases and we have to take them on their word that this is what they want to do, right?
That's a
Like,
really tough, good
they- you
know.
question that I want you to remember next week, next DRB meeting and ask Paul. Because the LDRs require master plan now.
Right.
Right? Even if, and you have to master plan in the LDRs that just passed for 10 years. Right? So you're gonna see next meeting an airport master plan. And the airport is saying, we've got the next 4 years all mapped out. But the stuff in the end of that 10-year period is sort of like conceptual. We may not actually do it. But we have to show you the development potential
Right.
for the next 10 years. So it's this weird situation where you're gonna see a lot of applications that the future phases get fuzzier and fuzzier as you go out.
I mean, otherwise they would need to show 100% the next 10 years is funded and planned and ready to go, or else we would have to come back and say, I can't prove phase one because I don't think you are gonna do phase
It's
two,
not, I
right?
don't think you are going to, it's that there's no plan to do that.
That's what the master plan says, though. The master plan says, I am going to
No,
do
but
phase.
You're dancing with me, Charlie.
I
You
know,
you-
but
You know, the proper question was asked, could this thing stand on its own? And the answer is no. And all that's really in front of us that's concrete is what they're going to do now.
Can I ask,
I'm not going to keep saying it because
what
it's
part of,
Smith, you know?
Yeah.
what part of phase one is non-compliant that is required by phase two to bring it into compliance?
Well, as Dave said, there's been some waivers requested for construction of the roadway. The roadway wouldn't be paved in phase one. They're proposing a water line that would only be able to serve phase one. It wouldn't be able to serve
Mhm.
future phases. And then as Frank pointed out, the roadway, if it were its a standalone project, would have to be extended to the property line.
Yeah.
I think I got them all. Is that right, Dave?
And the
Oh, I'm
sidewalk?
sorry. Yes,
Oh, and the sidewalk.
Yeah, if you
the
scroll
sidewalks
up
and the
in the
curbs,
staff report.
correct.
I understand where Frank's coming from and I agree with his point, and I think kind of tried to been a little sympathetic to the argument about, you know, it's expanding it for family use. And I'm open to talking about that. I would like to talk a little bit about the water line.
Mhm.
And how are you gonna handle fire response? I can't imagine an 1.5 main is adequate to put out a house fire.
Right. The fire department said if we don't put in fire hydrant, they would like the houses sprinkled, and they gave us the sprinkler system requirements for the houses.
Okay, so
So the houses will be sprinkler.
Yes.
Houses.
So as a condition of approval, that's something that is that a dry chemicals sprinkler
No,
or?
it's a low pressure system.
Have you
that's
run?
in this report.
Okay. I
There's
must
a
have-
specific
I,
comment
well, I
on it.
saw that, but I was a little confused as to,
Which
whether
we,
the-
what we typically do when there's more than, I think, more than 2 or 3 houses on a.
Yeah, but this is even more than the normal question that John's getting to. The fire department and the water department questioned whether there would be adequate pressure for this system and said they're requesting engineered calculations by a professional
Got it.
at the final plat stage for you to demonstrate that those requirements were met.
Okay.
okay, because that's kind of, it just doesn't seem to make sense to me that, you know, and then God forbid you have more than one fire at a time. It's, I don't know what kind of double jeopardy goes into that calculation. And this is something, have you talked with an insurance carrier about this?
So,
And there's insurance is good with this?
if I can answer the question. Sorry, John. So we went over with the water department and the fact that normally these particular types of domestic or residential sprinkler systems use a 2-inch service. Only because of, it's not a commercial property where they're trying to save every component in the building. What it is designed to do is to knock down the fire enough so people can they get it out safely, save lives. So that's why we're dealing with smaller diameter lines, because you're not having to deliver as much water to save every article in a building, which is in a commercial entity where we're used to 4-inch and 6-inch sprinkler lines entering a building. This domestic design is designed to save lives but not to save every pillow in the building. So that's the starting point. Now, the other thing that is in plan view, you don't get an understanding of in regards to the vertical changes in this particular property is that there's a significant elevation change between Heinsberg Road and the most easterly portions. And it's that elevation change that allows you to overcome the pressure losses in the water line that otherwise normally we look for a 2-inch line to basically enable that there's adequate pressure by the time it gets to the building. Well, just the very nature of the elevation changes creates extra pressure at the bottom that otherwise wouldn't be there if you're on a level surface. So that's what allows for that 1.5-inch line. I remember when Keith said, Dave, I want to use an 1.5-inch line. It's like, ooh, that's right on the edge, but we ran the numbers and it works, and I wouldn't have shown it on the plan otherwise. So we're very comfortable with that condition that requires that we come back and demonstrate to the water department. We already went through that in our meeting with them. And they said, oh, yeah, well, it's not your typical property in regards to the amount of opportunity at the bottom of the roadway in regards to pressure losses.
Would the same rationale apply to the subsequent houses if they're built?
So in the future, you're required to put in an 8-inch main to service any additional units beyond this. At that point, you'll have both sprinklered properties, and with the 8-inch line, you'll have standard hot fire hydrant service for fire protection.
Off the 1.5 then, so not at the bottom of it, you've got house, your 3 houses going down the hill. So it works for the house that's closest to the top of the hill.
Mhm.
And it works if the other houses are also have a demand, people taking showers and things like that at the same time.
Yes.
So.
Yep.
Okay. I said I'd check with my insurance carrier.
Yep.
Okay, are we ready to move on? I know we haven't solved your angst about this, Frank, but are we?
Thanks, just sort of a black and white observation.
Yep. Okay.
Well, and I guess if we could scroll up on the staff report here, just to this point with and staff points out, regarding the road being gravel and the sidewalks not being put in, that those two fall under the alternative compliance provisions, and then there's criteria that need to be met. Have we seen an argument under those criteria?
Yeah, that was at the last meeting.
Okay.
They specifically talked about how it better served the rural character of this development
Okay.
to have integrated walking on the roadway surface.
I actually, now that I look at the conditions, I guess I'm a little confused. Forgive me. To install a 1.5-inch water line in phase 1, just must in phase 2 be replaced with an 8-inch. Well, it'll be replaced. In other words, then everyone will be served by the 8-inch line, and okay. So that 1.5 inch is just an interim measure, assuming it gets built out.
Correct.
It
If
won't
I-
be, and in addition, there'll be an 8-inch line for the other. It's not that.
What the water department has asked is that when the 8-inch line goes in, that each of the individual homes would be connected into the 8-inch line and the 1.5-inch line would be abandoned.
Okay, let's move on to number 2. I'm gonna read this. And I think this is mostly a heads up to the applicant for further reviews. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to modify the plans to comply with the comments and respond to the question of the South Burlington Water Department Superintendent as part of the final plat application.
That's fine.
Okay,
If you're reading number 7, that's not a potable water line connection. So there's a standing water area that's intended to be utilized for irrigation of flowers and other things. And that's all that is it's not connected to the potable water system.
thank you. Number 3, staff recommends the board require the applicant to demonstrate satisfactory fire pressure flow as part of the final plat application. We've kind of already visited that, so that's another kind of heads up.
Correct.
Number 3, another heads up that needs to be addressed at final plat is the responding to the comments of the city stormwater department.
All right, that's my fault. I went to staff and said, what's up with these comments? Oh, we addressed all of those. In fact, we have a state application in for the state stormwater permit. We muffed as far as getting back to MRSA in regards to a sign off on those particular comments, but they're all implemented in the plan.
Okay. Number 4, I'm going to read. Staff recommends the board discuss whether they will include a condition requiring solar orientation given the existing ground mounted solar array. My question is, who owns the ground mounted solar array? Okay. So that's an interesting question. Do we require, is that adequate to fulfill the requirement that, homes be oriented, properties be oriented on their roof lines to maximize solar gain?
Well, let me ask a practical question. I mean,
Mhm.
how will these houses be run? Is the solar energy generated by the solar array sufficient for a self-contained energy system or not?
What I have now is we put in a solar field big enough. We haven't bought power in 7 years. It goes back to Green Mountain Power.
You have a surplus, in other words.
Well, I don't have a battery storage. So it goes right to Green Mountain Power. And then at nighttime, when the solar field doesn't work, I pull off from their system, which is kind of beneficial to them because during the day they get to use mine for commercial rates.
And how will that still be the case if this project is built?
Yes.
So you'll still be essentially net zero as far as.
I don't know that every house will be net zero, but when we put the system in, I had them run big enough wire that I could expand the system in case we ever got to this point. So everything's in place. Basically, I just would have to buy more panels and put them in and hook them in. But the wire that runs from the solar field back to the shop where it goes back to Green Mountain Power, we installed big enough to cable to handle almost twice of what I have there.
Here I would go with the purpose of the solar gain requirement, and which he's got obviously met.
Frank, you got to speak up so we can hear you, please.
I mean, I think he's meeting the intent and the purposes of solar gain requirement.
That would be my thought. Does anyone disagree with that?
No, also note that the roof lines are all shown as running essentially east-west, so you have a south-facing roof.
Yeah.
So if you want to put solar on it, that's the way to go.
Right.
Well,
when
but
we
the roof, they're not committing to that particular roof line.
Okay.
It's
No, but I think.
just a box.
Yeah.
So I guess just a further confirmation question for me, is all, phase 1 is kind of within your family. So assuming they would have would be set up so they could tap into the solar
Yes.
field you currently have. Is the intention that the future phases would potentially tap in as well, or not as much?
I really
Yeah, you
can't
don't know.
speak for them.
Yeah.
But, you know, we did buy this. A matter of fact, I produce more power than what I use. So Green Mountain Power makes off from me every month.
Yeah. And
Um,
And just to get to Frank's point, the requirement isn't that, solar is being used, it's that, every home kind of has the option to put that on there. So I get, what I'm trying to get at is,
Yes, how
the-
it works is, like I said, they set up a big panel in my garage.
Yep.
Everything goes through that, goes back to Green Mountain Power. And then what you do is I can credit anybody on Green Mountain Power's line.
Gotcha.
I can say they get 10% of what the solar field makes. And they will get that every month.
Mhm.
So the houses do not have to be hooked up to the solar field. They could benefit off the solar
Yes.
field.
We will bring our addresses the next.
Okay, that's helpful, thanks.
Okay, any other?
Keep in mind, this is phase one.
Yeah.
Okay, number 5. Staff recommends the board consider whether these criteria permit the applicant to convert the existing lawn area to a community garden or whether it must be maintained as lawn. The applicant may also revert to an unmaintained wetland area at their choosing. So, let's start out, I think this is a complicated one. Let's start out with what is your pleasure with this?
As far as that quadrant of land,
Yes, keeping the lawn or letting it grow.
right now it is lawn.
Mhm.
They did, do soil samples. That is not considered wetland. It just buffers wetland.
Right?
So I think their feeling was, they would like to do some sort of gardens or whatever down there.
Okay.
I will work with my 2 sisters on all of that, but, I mean, I guess we could let it grow. I mean,
Well, the question for the board is, moving on to 6. If the board determines that conversion to a community garden from lawn is not exempted under section E above, this section F describes an alternative path forward. I won't read the rest of it in spite of what Dave might want. But the question is, can this be converted, I think, and help me if I'm misreading this, can this be converted to a garden? Do the regulations allow for that to happen?
Right, so that's for you to decide. If you could pan up a bit, so it's under E, it says the
Mhm.
following activities are not required to meet the standards in this section, basically the wetland protection standards, and do not require a local permit. Maintenance of pre-existing gardens, landscaped areas / lawns, structures and impervious surfaces located within a wetland buffer and that were legally in existence as of the effective date of these regulations does not require a permit. So what it stops short of saying is conversion between those things.
Right.
It may have intended to mean that. I think it could go either way, and that's why we put it on you guys, because that you're the volunteer board who gets to make these decisions.
Well, let's go to purpose again. Is there
The lawyer speaks.
some, and I don't know the answer to it. Is there some functional, from the standpoint of why we want to preserve wetlands and why we want to preserve wetland buffers? Is anybody here competent to say whether a garden is less efficacious than a lawn?
So we did excerpt D4A right above that. That might be helpful.
Yeah, standards for wetland protection.
Yeah, I get that. And what I'm saying is I'm going to the purpose of the regulation and construing it. Because the question you raised, can you interchange them, is a reasonable one raised by the language. So to me, resolving that question is a matter, it's reasonable to go to the purpose of the regulation. The purpose of the regulation is to, as far as possible, preserve the wetland buffer function. So does a garden do that as well as a lawn?
Yeah, Marty can pull up 1206 purpose statement.
first of all, could we define a garden? I mean, do you mean like a vegetable garden? Do you mean raised beds? Do you mean,
They,
like in England, your garden is your backyard?
right, so, I would surmise that, there might be a vegetable garden someplace down there. I'm not sure, but it would probably be, flowers and trees and whatnot, just, I myself would like to see, some nice trees planted throughout there because it would give me more of a buffer between me and Lane Press.
Well, let's assume it's a vegetable garden. I asked the same question. Again, if nobody's competent to answer the question, we can say, oh, well, we don't know the
Well, we're
answer.
pulling up the purpose statement now.
What would your suggestion be to use it for?
Well, it goes to, it is, well, that's interesting. I mean, read the purpose.
Let me read
That's
it.
making my point, I think. Do we meet the purpose any less by allowing a garden to be switched out for a lawn?
It is the purpose of this section to protect the city's wetland resources in order to proceed to protect wetland functions and values related to surface and groundwater protection, stormwater treatment, wildlife habitat, and flood control. The city intends to strictly protect Class 1 wetlands, Class 2 wetlands, and their respective buffers via the standards of this section. The city also intends to provide protection that offers limited flexibility for larger Class 3 wetlands over 5,000 square feet in size and their respective buffers, and for Class 2 wetlands and their respective buffers in specific identified areas of the city.
So I just repeat the same question.
Yeah, so I guess being a gardener, I can't imagine that putting in either vegetables or flowers or some trees would, oops, you disagree.
So
Let me
if the
finish.
ground is tilled. Okay, go ahead.
It would compromise the buffer any more than a lawn would, but what do I know? Charlie, obviously you have some thoughts.
Yeah, I believe there's discussion about tilled ground for farming in wetland buffers. And that it would be suggested that it's not
Okay.
because of runoff from the bare earth.
From the what?
Bare earth, right?
A bare earth,
Imagine you
okay.
have a 100-year flood and the
Yeah.
ground was just tilled, right? All that's just gonna run into your wetland, all
Okay.
that erosive material. So I don't know, can we put limitations on what the garden can and cannot be? If they're gonna come in and say, we're gonna grow corn, that's
Right.
one thing. If they're gonna plant trees, that's another, right?
Right. Could we,
I think that gets a little difficult to, I think that's a little bit difficult and it's a little shaky ground. If you look at the map, this wetland buffer is a pretty small fraction of the civic space area, maybe 10%. If the board is feeling like they really don't want to see increased erosion potential in that area, I would suggest just say it's lawn, you can keep it as lawn or essentially equivalent to lawn or more vegetated than lawn. I wouldn't get into the specifics of like what kind of garden. That feels way like government overreach.
so more vegetated lawn, would that include planting bulbs? Would it include?
Well, basically what you're saying, what I'm hearing you saying, which is sort of where I was headed, is if we identify where that wetland buffer is, we have had discussions before where it's like, basically you can't do anything in that wetland buffer that changes the vegetation there. But if they know where that boundary is and they have their garden outside of that, then that's fine.
I might word it, will not increase
Yes.
runoff or erosion from the property
Okay,
into neighboring wetland.
There you go.
that's helpful,
Very-
Charlie. Thank you.
That is,
Okay. Very good.
We got there. Thanks.
That is good.
Just one quick question. You wouldn't want anything that would require tilling of the soil there.
So bottom line is like what the recommendation or at least potential is that we need any use there needs to demonstrate that it's essentially creating a situation that's no worse than what's out there today.
Okay.
And that two, that whatever you're doing is not going to create additional impacts, adverse impacts on the wetland.
Okay.
So there are opportunities in order to demonstrate compliance with that. But obviously the extreme example is going out and tilling the area and then having a big rainstorm event.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Having it
yeah.
all end up in the wetland.
Right.
And yes, so that's.
So you get it.
That's a good.
Right, so lawn or
balancing
trees
act.
is a good thing.
With exact language deferred for deliberation.
Gotcha.
Okay. All right, number 7. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to address the comments of the city arborist at the final plat stage of review. That's another heads up.
That's fine.
And number 8, I'm gonna read the underlying question. The board require the applicant to demonstrate compliance with this criterion by providing documentation of existing access at the final plat stage of review. So again, another heads up of what we want to see included final plat.
That's fine. I think ultimately that's all built into the access components. But right now on the application, there are utilities that ultimately would be dedicated to a utility parcel. It is smaller than a standard residential parcel, but nonetheless, what staff is basically saying is, hey, let's make sure that the utility people can actually access that utility
Right.
parcel. So we're fine with that.
Okay,
That
good.
only makes sense, and that's in the interest of all the parties that the agreements currently exist.
Great. Okay. Any other comments or questions from the board before we turn to public comment? Nope. Hearing none, are there any members, pardon me, of the public who would like to comment? Seeing none online, none here. So we are going to be closing this and is that,
If you feel like you have all the information you need, you can close both together
Oh,
with one
okay.
motion if you'd like.
all right. Do we, before we take a vote, do we feel like we have all the information we need to close both of these applications?
I do.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to close MP 2403 and SD 2408 of WGM Associates. Second, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No? Okay, good.
Thank you for
We
your
will
time.
see you back here again.
There we go.
Have a good evening, hopefully.
You also.
Take care of yourselves and each other.
Minutes, 2 sets of minutes. All right, 2 sets of minutes, and then we need to talk about next year's schedule, please.
Oh, okay. Would anyone like to move that I'm gonna excuse myself.
Your microphone is off.
Would someone like to move adoption of the 2 minutes before us?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Yes, me, Dawn. The motion is carried. The minutes are approved.
Okay. And then for other business.
Good night.
I included in your packet, a calendar for 2025. Marty, if you could pull that up.
1%. I'm gonna look over your
Yeah,
shoulder.
right there.
Oh, yeah, yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So we lucked out this year, you lucked out this year. There are only 2
Night,
dates
Dave.
that need to move to Wednesday because of council conflicts on Monday.
How did this meeting not get moved to a Wednesday?
Because the board has always met on election day.
I brought it up when we talked about it. And the
Did I not
response I
say
got from
something?
you was, why are you running for election?
Really?
That's what you said.
What a snarky ass.
So yeah, really, really great.
Are we still on the?
Yes, we're still recording. We're still having a meeting.
I'm
Please
fine with
focus.
saying that in
Please
public.
take focus for 5 minutes.
Children.
So President's Day and Labor Day are the only days you have to move to Wednesday. There's no conflict with 4th of July this year. Your meeting will be on the 1st and then the 4th of July will be on a Friday. So I was gonna keep the standard August recess.
Mhm.
Does that all sound good?
That's good.
Yep.
I have a question. If we're planning on traveling but can call in, is that allowable or is it
Yes,
just best that I, okay,
absolutely.
great.
Please let me know in advance as soon as you know if you're gonna be out generally from here into the future. Next 2 meetings are normal. Yeah, the rest of the year is normal. We're normal until the second meeting in January.
And are you gonna be gone the next meeting?
Nope.
Cause you said something about talking to Paul.
Oh, Paul's gonna come and give a presentation on what actually got adopted.
Good.
It's gonna be a little bit higher than the presentation Kelsey gave.
Okay.
Kelsey talked about the details. Paul's gonna talk a little bit about how what the objectives were. And the reason for that is because I think the first few applications you have seen are different than the types of development the regulations were really designed to shape.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So we want to get you off on the right foot.
Okay.
The airport master plan and phase 1 are next meeting.
Okay.
All right, great. So we'll see you for deliberations in 2 weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.